Good morning. Good morning, good morning. I'm really happy to see people here and happy to see the people I can't see on Zoom yet, but I'm glad you're here. Welcome to Northwest, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. My name is Vanessa Washington, and I will be your worship associate this morning. Cameron Young, a native Texan and lifelong Unitarian Universalist, is delivering the sermon as part of the UUA Midwest America Region's Sermon of the Month series. As a reminder, we are using the COVID Act Now website to track the community risk level in the Detroit metro region. Currently, we are in the high community risk level category. Therefore, our music is pre-recorded by our choir director, Ken Hermanot. Alex Myers is off this weekend. Ben Gable, our congregational administrator, will be running the AV booth this morning. Now let's greet each other. I invite you to greet your neighbors with a wave from wherever you are. We'll have our Zoom view on gallery. We can see the folks there waving. Now, folks in the sanctuary, if you'll turn to that camera, the people on Zoom will be able to see you. And now we can just greet each other in the sanctuary. Our reading for our chalice lighting is by Reverend Jennifer Grayson, Connected Through the Web of Life. We light this chalice, symbol of our purpose to bring more love and justice into the world. We light this chalice, knowing our congregation as a church dispersed across communities, not bound by walls, but connected through the web of life. Each month, Northwest shares 50% of the plate collections with a local 501c3 organization. Our shared plate collection recipient for August is the Michigan Education Justice Coalition. They are fighting to protect public schools and advocating for increased school funding for decolonized and culturally inclusive curriculums, student voice in leadership, and school budgets that reflect community values. You can text your offering to 248-574-8034 with your amount and plate. You can donate online, select Give to Plate Collection 50%, or if you're here in person, you can put checks or cash in the basket in the front of the sanctuary.
Hello, my name is Rochelle with the Michigan Education Justice Coalition, or the MAJC. The MAJC is an organization dedicated to advocating for quality education in the state of Michigan. We advocate for equitably and fully funded schools that approach education and learning in a healthy and healing way. We use our funding and donations to continue to listen to parents' and students' needs through listening sessions. Last year alone, we held over 60 listening sessions. We also work with community members to communicate those needs to the decision makers at state and local levels. The MEJC holds school board candidate forums so that two-way discussions on issues and needs happen with the community and the people running to become members of local school boards. And finally, we work with partner organizations on Get Out the Vote, because although advocacy does not end at the ballot box, it can begin there. For more information on how you can become involved with the Michigan Education Justice Coalition, you can find us on the web at miadjustice.org.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged praise. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
The reading this morning is from both Adrienne Marie Brown and Reverend Mark Morrison Reed. We have experienced what it's like to release any assumption that one person has all the skills needed to lead and support the work. When there's so much to be done to transform the world, Brown offers us a gentle and liberating reminder that none of us has to bear such responsibility alone. Adrienne Marie Brown. And this next is from number 580 in the Gray Hymnal. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed.
How long, till this world is free from suffering? How long, till blessed peace will reign? How long, till the power of love will come, and heaven's will is done? How long, how long, till every gun is silenced? How long, till hate and war shall end, till every battle's thunder will fade to blessed peace, and sounds of war will cease? How long, press on, let faith and hope sustain you. Press on, keep working for the day when all of God's children will live in peace as one, until that new day comes. Press on, press on, press on, press on, press on. Send me, send me, send me, send me to work for the kingdom. Send me, send me to go and live for peace, until the love of heaven to earth shall descend, and peace will reign again. send me, send me, send me. Press on, we will sing a peaceful song. But still we're praying on. How long, how long, how long, how long?
In her book, Emergent Strategy, writer, doula, and Black feminist activist Adrienne Murray Brown speaks of the scientific phenomenon known as fractals, which she defines as objects or quantities that display self-similarity, which means it looks roughly the same at any scale. A fern is an example she provides for fractals. If you look at a fern through a microscope, it will reproduce an identical pattern as the large-scale object. Another concept she uses is biomimicry. Brown contextualizes biomimicry to suggest that when systems and institutions bump up against design flaws, they can look at ecosystems, including micro-ecosystems that have already solved this challenge. Answers to the problems that plague our world can literally be found in nature, and even in the most microscopic organisms who solve these problems efficiently and cohesively. The church as fractal is a good metaphor for how we want to be in the world. We seek to create beloved community among ourselves and through our relationships in hopes that the world will replicate. A quote often attributed to Gandhi is, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." However, the actual quote reads, "We but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As one changes their own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards them. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do." Brown also uses an analogy of a spider web. When one strand of the web is broken, the entire web is prone to collapse. When we in UU Spaces speak of our seventh principle, belief in the interdependent web of all existence, we're not merely speaking in metaphors. Our existences are intricately woven with all life. When violence, oppression, and marginalization occur elsewhere in the world, we are consciously and unconsciously bound to it, and vice versa. Brown tells us that when we speak of systemic change, we need to be fractal. The same spirals on seashells can be found in the shape of galaxies. We must create patterns that cycle upwards. So someone who identifies as transgender, specifically non-binary or not male nor female, Unitarian Universalism was one of the first spaces I could show up authentically in, give me language for my own experience, and thus empowering me to be myself out in the world. At the 2017 General Assembly in New Orleans, we changed the language for the second of 6 sources in our faith, from words and deeds to prophetic men and women to words and deeds of prophetic people, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. This was to recognize that past prophets who have revealed to us truth and meaning have not all fit within the construct of the gender binary. This includes trans people like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, whose civil disobedience eventually led to the Pride movement. When I came out in my own home city of Fort Worth as a direct result of my faith making space for me, I was one of maybe a handful of trans or non-binary people that I knew locally. 5 years later, I know dozens, maybe hundreds of them, many of whom have told me that I helped inspire them to live more authentically. Ripples, fractals. In Emergent Strategy, we're invited to envision a world yet to come through the lens of science fiction. The science fiction writer in particular is Octavia Butler. Science fiction writers themselves have often been prophets of their times, with their own imaginative visualizations having eventually become reality. Jules Verne foretold the moon landing 104 years before it happened. Mark Twain wrote a short story of a medium strikingly similar to the internet. H.G. Wells wrote of catastrophe-producing uranium-based bombs. In novels from the 70s to the 90s, Octavia Butler told stories of worlds ravaged by authoritarianism and climate change, which no longer feel like dystopian fiction in 2022. But she also told stories of the resilient humans who managed to build better societies amidst such chaos. The next piece at the heart of emergent strategy is adaptation. One of the cornerstones of liberal religion, according to Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams, is that revelation is never sealed. God and truth are always in process, constantly changing and being revealed to us. We live in times of unprecedented change. While the disastrous effect of the COVID-19 pandemic and our national response to it should never be minimized, we've seen resilience and innovation emerge from it. We found ways to make church more accessible to those most vulnerable. We reimagined collaborative ways of doing hybridized small and large events. Most recently, our General Assembly in Portland this past June. What I've observed throughout this pandemic is the direct correlation of an institution's ability to live out their mission, center their values, and decenter personalities, and that institution's sustainability through uncertain times. People give time and money to organizations who practice what they preach. It's really that simple. Admittedly, we're not always perfect at that. At your Unitarian Universalist Association, we have a pretty elaborate search system which helps to match ministerial candidates with prospective congregations. This year, more congregations came up empty-handed than ever before, as we've experienced a major shortage in ministers looking for positions. The other day, I was asked by an acquaintance, a Catholic who knew what I did for a living but had very little contextual understanding of UU. She asked me point blank, "Do you guys have a minister shortage right now?" She was privy not only to a shortage in her religious context, but also as an educator. Her observations, there's been a mass exodus of people in and or pursuing all helping professions. Nurses, teachers, ministers, counselors. So in anxious time, our individualistic society seeks both saviors and scapegoats. people to come in with superhero capes and fix all our problems, people to blame when things go wrong. Since by their nature they lead from a vulnerable place, this burden tends to be placed disproportionately on the shoulders of servant leaders. Adrienne Murray Brown observes that so many of our organizations working from social change are structured in ways that reflect the status quo. We have singular, charismatic leaders, top-down structures, money-driven programs, destructive methods of engaging conflict, and unsustainable work cultures. This results in burnout, overwork, underpay, unrealistic expectations, i.e., this leader is going to come in and help us grow and drive up pledging units when we know long-term sustainable growth is contingent upon an infinite number of factors beyond who's in the pulpit. She also says we get organizational splitting, personal drama, disrupting movements, and stagnation, or our inability to make decisions. This phenomenon is compounded with leaders of marginalized identities, and UU organizations are far from immune. The report from the UUA's Commission on Institutional Change, or Widening the Circle of Concern, tells us what many of us already inherently knew. The turnover rate for leaders, and when I say leaders, I mean ministers, religious professionals, and lay leaders alike, is significantly higher for those who are Black and Indigenous people of color, or BIPOC for short, and or people who are trans identified. Though I'm inching closer to ordination as a UU minister, my plan for the foreseeable future is to remain in my calling of associational ministry rather than congregational ministry. I will certainly never say never, but I did work in a congregation as a religious educator for 5 years. I came out during my tenure in this congregation, and while many were affirming and many made mistakes in all of their earnestness, which is perfectly natural, I could gradually see a shift in how I was perceived and respected as I went from identifying as male to being openly trans and sometimes presenting more femininely or fluidly. While there had already been some issues because of my age and inexperience, they became exacerbated from this. There was a shift in willingness to respect my own boundaries and personal space, and I was becoming a shell of myself. Associational ministry, on the other hand, while certainly bearing its own challenges, has presented an infrastructure centered in equity and inclusion. The UUA prioritizes employees with multicultural competency and ongoing training to build on it. In my workplace, people use my correct pronouns far more often and never question the validity of my identity nor the pronouns that I use. It's also nice to not feel like 200 people are your boss and that your livelihood is subjected to their every whim. I don't feel like people are keeping tabs on me and scrutinizing my every move. There is a more collaborative, but also a more formal supervisory structure than exists in most congregations. Informal structures privilege those in power. There's also something to be said about the way our broader national culture, rooted heavily in Protestant work ethic, perceives servanthood. The suffering servant archetype has been seen as noble and typical for folks across all helping professions. I think those who have historically gone into helping professions have bought into this nobility and assumed self-sacrifice to be a part of the territory. Until now. I think people of younger generations are setting appropriate boundaries for the sake of their own well-being. Too many teachers I know have been overburdened with polarized politics, infusing the classroom, among other expectations. Nurses overburdened with full hospital beds as the result of negligent state and national governments who unnecessarily politicized a virus for their own self-interests. Institutions, churches included, which center hierarchy and wealth, are imploding in on themselves. The other side of that coin, because it's not all doom and gloom, is that we're seeing new models for equity and collaboration emerge. Some of them based on ancient methods. And those being innovative are the ones not only surviving, but thriving. So I've worked with a couple of congregational boards on using discernment circles for decision making. Everybody takes their turn speaking when a decision is at stake, and consensus building is prioritized. These methods are based in millennia-old practices of indigenous peoples. When I helped model this for a congregational board, meaning everybody got their turn to speak, nobody was talking over each other. Simple but complex, right? Many of the female-identified people in the room remarked, "It's nice to feel like I have a voice for a change." With this in mind, I believe it's time to put our science fiction goggles and imagine what these collaborative and equitable models can look like for the 21st century UU Church and centuries to come. How can we become beloved community even without a minister, or practice truly shared and equitable ministry with a minister? Will we have the courage to recognize that the way we've been doing things is no longer serving us, or never served many in the first place? What could the church and other institutions look like if we moved from competition to collaboration, from power hoarding to power sharing, from individualism to community, from viewing progress as bigger or more to progress as quality and sustainability, from perfectionism to appreciation, from urgency toward understanding? What a powerful church that would be. What a powerful world that would be. And it's within our grasp. May it be so, and amen.
In the branches of the forest, in the petals of the marigold, on the shoulder of the mountain, in the vastness of the sea, you will find a brooding sadness over all the ancient watershed. You will see it written plainly on the wind and in the sand. There's a blight upon the mountain, there's a sickness in the evening sky, and we ask the age-old question, can we purge us of this sin? Can we save the little nestling from the venom of the cankerworm? Can we clear the look of anguish from the soft eyes of the dawn? In the thunder, new commandments sound a warning through the wilderness. Let the forest be untainted, let the streams be undefiled, let the waters of the river, as they flow down to the ocean, be as sweet as in the
Our reading for our chalice extinguishing comes from Reverend Maddie Cervantes. We keep its light in our hearts. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again.